I didn't want to talk about this game any more than I already have, but I remembered a few things after I posted the last video. 1. There's DLC for One Piece World Seeker. 2. They give you 3 new characters to play as, with their own stories and gameplay styles attached. And 3. I paid for it preemptively before I actually played it, because I thought the game was going to be good, so I'm going to get my money's worth out of this shit. Hello, I am Goose. And if you didn't know already, One Piece World Seeker is one of the biggest disappointments of the decade. This is an addendum to my last How I Feel About videos, so check that out if you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Anyways, over the course of a few months after World Seeker came out, it ended up getting some DLC. A few minor things like costumes and challenges, but my main focus in this video is the 3 added storylines. The Void Mirror prototype, Where Justice Lies, and the unfinished map. Each one comes with a new playable character, Roronoa Zoro, SABO, and Trafalgar Law, respectively. And when I saw them once I finished the main story, I thought, maybe there's a slight chance of redeeming this game. Most of the aspects of World Seeker were awful, but I feel like if the gameplay was more enjoyable, or rather, less unbearable, then maybe I could be more forgiving of the game's blatant flaws. So I'd say World Seeker has maybe 3 chances to redeem itself by giving me a character that's at least decent to play. I know stuff like the slow-ass turning or the confusing controls won't be fixed in the slightest, since, they didn't patch those or anything. This is strictly about the playstyle. And I won't be talking about how you explore either, because it's just a lot of running around from one side of the map to the other. But fast travel basically remedies that, so it's fine. I mean, it's not fine, but you know what I mean. I'll be going through each of the 3, talking a little bit about the story that these characters go through, followed by how they play, and ending with a general comparison to how Luffy plays. So without further ado, let's get this over with. Let's start with Zoro's story, the Void Mirror prototype. I'd say this one makes sense. Zoro runs off to do his own thing pretty early on in the main storyline. And by doing his own thing, I mean he got lost. In Luffy's story, he kind of just blips out, and then shows up at the end to slash a robot and say, "I've seen some shit, man." The whole story revolves around exploring a secret laboratory underneath the sea prison I forget the name of. Going on this mini-adventure to try and beat the shit out of the main villain, Isaac, so Luffy doesn't have to bother. But that wouldn't fit with the main story, so instead he goes in the laboratory to find a prototype for a robot that fights with 3 swords. What? Turns out that in the one cutscene where Zoro and Isaac fight, Isaac was recording his battle data to create a robotic copy of Zoro to be a better version of his old robots. Imagine an army of flying metal Zoros with an actual sense of direction. If I was some kind of villain, I'd want that, not gonna lie. During his quote-unquote investigation, he meets Tashigi, who he has kind of a one-sided rivalry with. They end up figuring it out together and destroying the robot copy of Zoro. It's a pretty interesting story, with Zoro stopping something that would have been a huge pain in the ass for Luffy to fight, since swords are like one of the only things that can do any proper damage to him. I mean, bullets and punches just kind of bounce off if they're not coated with any of that hockey stuff. But at least now we know what Zoro meant when he said he was around the island. Now, as for his gameplay, it's certainly different from Luffy, but I gotta point out Zoro's gimmick, if you can call it that. In the One Piece anime and manga, Zoro has 0 sense of direction. Like, seriously, he could get lost and turned around in, like, a hallway with no doors. So, to kind of reflect this in the gameplay, the minimap that he has in the corner is, like, super pixelated. I'm talking, like, 144p, like 2005 YouTube video quality. You can still use the fast travel, though, which ruins the funny a tiny bit for me. But if I wasn't able to fast travel in this game, I probably wouldn't have finished it. So, touché, I guess. Also, you don't really need the minimap to begin with, because anywhere you need to go is noted at all times with like a big blue waypoint. So it's not as much of a detriment for you as it seems. More of a humorous detail. Also, you can unlock the minimap in the skill tree for 999 skill points, which is kind of funny, considering most of the things in these DLC skill trees cost way less than Luffy's skill tree did. Anyways, how does this guy play? Well, for one, Zoro has a more sluggish and hands-on play style. Zoro can't sneak in barrels, perform takedowns, grab onto ledges, or sidestep attacks, which makes boss fights feel a little bit more static, at least for you. Instead of a dodge, Zoro has a guard, which can take a certain amount of damage before it breaks, and to compensate for movement, Zoro has infinite wall jumps. It's funny, if anything. It just looks kind of silly. Zoro's playstyle leads to the combat feeling a little boring, I'll say. It just consists of you running right up to enemies' faces, blocking their first attacks, and then hitting them with an auto combo point blank. Which I guess isn't too different from Luffy's, but at least he could, like, dodge stuff. I'd say the one thing Zoro's playstyle adds that's any good is his dash, where he'll, like, fly forward in the direction the camera's facing, which includes straight up. If you do this to an enemy, they'll get damaged, and it'll add a little more damage if you start your auto combo with that. It can also help with platforming, which kind of helps it make it a little more fun to explore, in my opinion. Obviously, it's not like stretching from tree to tree and slingshotting yourself around, but it's a start. As for his special attacks, they're a bit trickier than Luffy's, as instead of just going in the direction you're facing, like Luffy's specials, they go in the direction the camera is facing, requiring constant micromanagement of the camera if you want to make good use of your special attacks. However, I will admit the animations of these special attacks are much cooler looking than Luffy's. More dynamic shots. They're like the manga panels, but remade in 3D. And then there's Zoro's kind of ultimate ability, or trump card, or whatever. Press up on the D-pad and Zoro goes into serious mode, where he'll tie his iconic bandana around his head and gains a huge attack boost and knockback immunity. Or at least it's supposed to be knockback immunity. I don't know, it really didn't feel like he was immune to knockback when I was playing. But it was cool. It really makes you feel actually powerful for once in this game of inflated HP and one-hit knockout enemies. One last thing. Most of the battles in these little DLC story modes are ridiculously hard, even on like standard mode. Some of the fights in Zoro's storyline took tens of tries to complete, and Zoro got the least of this artificial difficulty. 10 enemies at a time with inflated HP that do over half your health in one hit are a running theme with this DLC stuff. I'm just glad they started softly with Zoro's story only having one of these kind of fights. So to summarize, Zoro is a slower, less agile, but stronger version of Luffy, I'd say. Not better or worse for the most part, just a different way to play the game. Now, in the real-life timeline, SABO's story comes next, but I'm going to save him for last. We're going to move on to the last one, the unfinished map, where you play as Trafalgar Law. Without a doubt, the character with the most broken ability in One Piece. His storyline is probably my favorite, because it actually adds an original character. Rule. I love Rule. The spunky and clumsy backpacking adventurer kid who wants to map the whole world. I'm just happy he has a proper design and a kind of charming personality, and not some random mashup of facial features. In terms of purpose, it seems like Law didn't have much place in this story. Zoro, yeah, he's on Luffy's crew, so he's here, naturally. And it makes some sense for Sabo to be on an island on the brink of war, on top of the world government stuff that's happening there. But Law? I'm not sure why he has to be here. But that's not important. I suppose they didn't have much of a place to put Law in the story, which is why he disappears immediately after showing up. Law's story is about helping Rule grapple with his tragic backstory or whatever, while also helping him solidify his dream of mapping the world, starting with Prison Island and the Sky Island above. In terms of gameplay, Law is a bit complicated. In some ways, he's even more neutered than Zoro. When it comes to movement, it makes the most sense for him to have stealth mechanics. Luffy and Zoro are most definitely not the types to be stealthily sneaking around anywhere. Law, unlike Zoro, is able to perform takedowns on enemies he gets the jump on. He doesn't have any sort of evasive or offensive dash, just a guard like Zoro, and a single wall jump to get over obstacles. His single wall jump was never really enough to jump any gap, which required me to constantly use his one actual movement ability, Shambles, which is a teleport move that can take you anywhere within its range. It's good for getting up high quick, or teleporting behind some dude and whacking them, which is pretty cool, I'll admit. Only issue is, it's on a meter, because how dare we get to have too much fun? That one tiny detail ends up plaguing his entire character. Law's movement abilities, combat skills, and even certain attacks on their own are dependent on his room meter, which is the small space in which Law's Devil Fruit can go ham. This meter starts off super small, which really limits what you're able to do in terms of combat and movement. It can be upgraded and all that jazz, but why bother with it at all? It just kind of holds back Law's potential to be an actual fun character. You can't do much else with the teleport either. I thought it would have been cool to make it possible to swap places with enemies or objects, but whatever. I can kind of excuse any of the stuff that they didn't do because Law's special attacks are busted! Specifically Sterben. I don't know how to pronounce it. That thing will just mow through enemies if you do it right. Especially compared to Luffy's and Zoro's, because those felt really weak. Even when they were upgraded. Only issue is, Law's specials have the same problem as Zoro's, where his specials go in the direction of the camera. which, even after playing through Zoro's story, was hard to kind of grapple with. Law's little ultimate ability has him take half of his health to boost his attack and double his rune gauge, which won't do much if your enemies just kill you in one hit and take ages to get rid of. I gotta say, spending more time on the Sky Islands instead of the ground made Law's story feel a bit different to Zoro and Sabo's, which was cool. Or at least it would be if it wasn't the worst thing ever. The final 3 battles of Law's story are what really started getting me heated. The first one is against this unnamed mini-boss character who will just keep calling in reinforcements and avoiding you. Said reinforcements just happen to be 5 or 6 of these shotgun enemies that deal about 75% of my health point blank in one hit. And they would constantly run at you with like a shoulder bash attack. And since Law has no proper movement ability other than his teleport that has a bit of a startup, I would end up losing very quickly, because they would just run at me a bunch, and then I'd be kind of stunned, and then they'd shoot me in one hit and kill me. Once you defeat all the quote-unquote fodder, you defeat the mini-boss and the fight ends, only for you to immediately get flung into another challenge after one cutscene. The exact same situation as the last one, only with Kizaru plopped in there for funsies, just constantly shooting bullets down at you while you avoid the enemies. I say avoid because you only have to avoid them for like 3 minutes instead of actually beating them with this battle. I swear I would have just quit the game there and now if I hadn't realized that I could just teleport to the high up balcony place and just not have to worry about the enemies on the ground. Sure, they'll come for you eventually, but then you just teleport to the other balcony. And because Kizaru can't go over to the balcony you're on, that's just another piece of the puzzle gone. After doing that a bunch of times, it takes you into the final battle, where it's just Kizaru all on his own. Except he's fucking roided! He is just constantly teleporting everywhere, dealing 80% of your HP with 1 or 2 moves at a time before teleporting away to do it again. The only real way to hit him is with a perfect guard, and they were the hardest to hit on Kizaru's light speed attacks. Then, when you inevitably die, he just taunts you by teleporting in the same spot over and over again. Although I'm not sure if that's a taunt or just the game being broken. This fight was awful. Took me like over 25 tries to make any progress at all. Absolutely one of the worst parts of this DLC. Just unbearable. So if I had to say anything about Law, combining his annoying meter management and sluggish playstyle with the inflated artificial difficulty towards the end, it just makes it so annoying. I'd say Zoro's DLC is more fun than Law's by a considerable margin. I'd play it for Rule though. Phenomenal character. Love that guy. Now we move on from DLC 3 to DLC 2, Where Justice Lies, starring SABO. This has some of the worst aspects of the DLC and some of the best. It's really baffling how middling this one turned out. Let me just get into it, starting with the story. SABO is a member of the Revolutionary Army, so naturally he's wondering what the Navy and world government are up to on Prison Island. The thing is, he doesn't inherently feel the need to attack Isaac, since Isaac is somewhat a part of SABO's plan, and vice versa. And spoilers, but who cares, honestly. SABO and his gang rescue Isaac, who is thought to be dead in some big-ass explosion at the end of Luffy's storyline. But nope, he'll get better. Probably. While Zoro has an excuse to be on the island, he doesn't exactly have a reason to have his own storyline, other than just fucking off and getting lost somewhere. But SABO, being a revolutionary, deducing what's going on this island on the brink of war, and some shady world government stuff, it makes a surprising amount of sense for him to be there. So, the story is good, and that's fine and whatever, I don't care. But how does SABO play? Well, surprisingly good, actually. He's the closest to Luffy out of all of the DLC characters, and he's more fun to play than Luffy, if I'm being honest. He can do all the things Luffy can do. Sneaking, takedowns, hiding in barrels, even flying off stuff to propel off of it. He even has stuff Luffy doesn't, like a wall jump, like the other two, and his specials go in the direction he's facing, like Luffy. Only thing is, SABO can fly for way longer, and has more control over his flight movement. This makes it much more enjoyable to play as SABO compared to any of the other characters, even if it was a bit hard to figure out how to control it properly. Also, instead of some like ultimate ability where he becomes super cool or whatever, he has this flame meter that gives him an attack boost when filled. Cool, whatever. There's also a thing he does in the final battle where he fights with this pipe that he has on his back, but I never ended up doing that during my playthrough, so it's probably the same as Zoro and Law's ultimate abilities or whatever. I just never thought to use it because those ultimate abilities are usually a detriment, if I'm being honest. But remember, despite what I'm saying, it's One Piece World Seeker at the end of the day, so there's a catch. There's always some kind of catch. Now, what is the catch? Well, I'll tell you. This is, I kid you not, the worst thing I've ever done for a video. And arguably the worst thing I've done in any video game, aside from playing my brothers in Smash Bros. Or my little brother in Mario Party, but that's besides the point. Where Justice Lies has the same problem as the unfinished map, but cranked up to fucking 50,000. The first roadblock was this battle in a cave. 12 enemies, all of them being able to take half your health in one hit, or teleport behind you, or gang up on you while you're in the middle of an attack, and just annoying stuff like that. And there's just some random big guy that's constantly ground pounding you, so you don't have any time to even do any combos. Because of the frequency of the enemies and their attacks, you can't do any normal combos or special attacks with the risk of being killed instantly in the middle of this pool of enemies. The only move I could do consistently was this flying slam move, because it takes you up in the air away from attacks and gives you a chance to recuperate. But even that doesn't work 100% of the time, because there's these enemies that will sometimes just start floating in the air and shooting projectiles at you to knock you down and get killed instantly again. And because every enemy has 10 times the health of any normal fodder, you have to spam the slam move until you build your tension meter to full, use your special move on whichever of the dozen death machines you like, and then repeat the process until you win. This took like 30 or 40 tries for me. It was nightmarish and such a headache to get through. But then, I did it. I finally managed to beat this stupid battle and got to progress to the next challenge. The next challenge was worse. Now, in that group of a dozen enemies I had to destroy in the last fight, there were some specific ones called Cipher Pole agents. They are the ones that can teleport right behind you and kill you instantly, fly high and shoot projectiles at you, and just be a general pain. This consisted of about 6 of them, with a 7th one having the health of a mini-boss, and a pacifista, which, if you don't know, are these giant bear-looking robots that can just run around, like punch you into the ground, and just kill you in one hit with projectiles with giant hitboxes. And the jump slam that I was using before doesn't even work here. It only actually worked in the last battle because the enemies would run directly up to you. But the Cipher Pole agents only get close to you when they want to kill you in one hit. Oh my god, I completely forgot about the turret! There's a turret in this area that constantly shoots hundreds of bullets at you that lock onto your current location. And you have to deal with that on top of the rest of the stuff you're doing. You don't get any breathing room this time around. It just becomes a nightmare of spamming the dodge button and hoping the turret doesn't deal too much damage to you before finishing your own auto combo. Doing this without the perfect dodge would be hell. Just straight hell. This is the only fight I had to turn down the difficulty for. The rest of the fights in the story mode, which are just 3 regular-ass boss fights, were fine. Fair enough. They weren't bullshit at all. But the fight before those, with the turret, the Cipher Pole agents, and the pacifista, and before that with the dozen one-hit kill enemies, you couldn't pay me to grind that out on my own. Okay, maybe you could. My point is that this is absolutely the worst ever. SABO's DLC is the worst by a fucking landslide. But the way he plays is so fun. At least compared to the regular shit. I don't know why they ruined it by putting him in this impossible garbage. Positively ridiculous. Holy shit. I wasn't intending on being too mean in my initial review of this game, because it's One Piece, you know, blah blah blah, and I don't like being too mean or whatever. But after playing the DLC, fuck this game. Genuinely. Just, oh my god, one of the most irritating, disappointing, frustrating games I've ever played. Quite possibly the worst thing ever. Sorry if you like this game, you're just wrong. Alright, conclusion time. I'll make this quick because I can't talk about this game anymore for my health. The One Piece World Seeker DLC packs are, for the most part, unbelievable dumpster fires. Like, holy cannoli, who is the QA guy for this? They need a right and proper smack upside the head, honestly. ZORO's is fine. SABO's is fuck you, bro. And Law's is okay. The most I can say about these DLCs is that they gave the world rule. And that's about it. One of these days I'm going to make a video about how to make a proper One Piece game that people would actually like. Maybe an RPG specifically if One Piece Odyssey flops. Which, going off of the recent trends, it's probably gonna flop. But I'm gonna play it anyways, because I'm obsessed with this stupid series. My name is Goose. I thank you very much for watching. And, Bandai Namco make one good anime game challenge impossible level, apparently. Now go away!